Well, we delve into the latest Afrobarometer perspectives when it comes to democracy and even the level of aversion to military incursions into democratic practice. It makes for interesting reading, and we're going to delve into some of the salient facts with our guests, whom we shall announce shortly. But let's look at some of what has been revealed by this latest Afrobarometer survey. If you look at the preference for democracy, you would see that there's a decline there. And if you look at it, you would see that from 82% in 2011, 2013, thereabouts. If you look at that 10-year denominator, you would look at a shrinkage of about 6 percentage points. And in 2021, 2023, it has declined to 76%. That is the stark reality. But let's move from there and also consider other aspects of the survey. Then you look at the rejection of military rule, like I said, a sharp decline. In the years between 2011 and 2013, we were looking at 86% saying that military rule had no place in our governance systems. But in 2021 to 2023, between that bracket, you have a decline of 18 percentage points, so that now we are looking at 68%. That tells a very sad story. It means then that what has happened in Mali, in Guinea, in Burkina Faso, in Niger has some sort of support, which should be worrying for our leaders and for all of us. Then you take another look at the satisfaction with democracy, and you would realize that there too, there has been a sharp decline, in fact, sharper than the other two, a 23 percentage point drop from 74% between the 2011-2013 window to 51% between 2021 and 2023. And that means that currently it could even be lower. It could even be lower. It tells you that in the sub-region and in Ghana, satisfaction with democracy is on the decline. But the question then is, should the military intervene in politics? Those who were sampled, those who spoke, those who were neutral to this were 5%. Those who said there should never, under no circumstances, be an intervention, 55%. But shockingly, those who say there can be an intervention if leaders abuse power, 40% are saying that. 40%. And that should concern all of us. It's a big cause for worry. These are some of the latest dynamics from the Afrobarometer survey. Now, when the question was asked about whether the country was going in the right direction, of course, Ghana, only 11% said yes, the country was headed in the right direction. Those who were neutral, 2%. Those who say no, the country is going in a wrong direction, 87%. A whopping 87%. If you add the yeses and the neutrals, you get 13%. Right? The yeses and the neutrals, you get 13%. And those who are saying no, the country is not headed in the right direction, 87%. Almost 90%, almost 9 in every 10 are saying the country is headed in a wrong direction. And that is the tale of the tape. Those are some of the facts and the figures from the latest Afrobarometer survey. Of course, it makes for very uncomfortable reading throughout this entire, period. And that is the survey that was put together by the Afrobarometer. We'll be getting into the details of same and highlighting some of those very salient dynamics that has been shared with you. I'm talking about the Democracy in Africa statistics and the survey that has been conducted by the Afrobarometer in this latest survey. Now let's go ahead and look at our guests who are joining us this morning as we get into the issues. We have from the Economic Fighters League, Ernesto Yeboah. He is the fighter general, Ernesto Yeboah. He joins the conversation. We have Dr. John Osai Kwapong. And it is crucial we have him on this conversation because he is a CDD fellow. And you know that in Ghana, Afrobarometer, CDD, they actually put this out. Also in the studio to give us some more scope, whether legally and governance-wise, Kweku Painso, he's a lawyer. He joins the conversation as well. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Let me start with Mr. Painso. And Tensi, you don't usually come into the studio. We are privileged to have you here this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
You're looking spiffy.
Thank you very much.
All right. And we also have Dr. Osai Kwapong. I saw you. A very good morning to you.
Good morning to you too, Benjamin.
All right. Let's try for Ernesto Yeboah. Do we have Ernesto yet?
Yeah, it's V-mate.
Sharp. You have to bring the V-mate on there. Anyway, so gentlemen, it's really good to have you. Let's start with Dr. John Osai Kwapong. You work with the CDD, so I want to throw this at you first. You've seen the declines in opting for democracy and the increments in support for military interventions. Not that it's a good thing, but the question is, why are the people leaning in this area? There are so many dynamics, but for you, this broad Afrobarometer survey, not just Ghana, but beyond, what does it reveal to you as a citizen?
Thank you very much. So I have been saying that there comes a point where citizens begin to look at what I've been calling the dividends of democracy. So, and I've been making reference to a piece in the Journal of Democracy that was published. This is as far back as 2009. But for me, it's been one of the most seminal pieces on the subject of the aftermath of all the transitions to democracy that we saw post the 1990 era. And one of the things the author said was that democracy is good, but a day is going to come where citizens are going to start asking what they are getting from democracy beyond the basic freedoms that democracy guarantees. And his concern was that when that day comes, if democracy is not able to show that citizens are getting more than just those basic cherished freedoms, the legitimacy that democracy enjoys in relationship to other forms of government may be questioned. Citizens may start asking, why democracy? What are we getting from democracy? Because they want a broad balance sheet that convinces them that this is still the way to go. And I think that explains why you're seeing some of that decline in support for democracy. Yes, in some countries, the levels, it's still good enough. So a place like Ghana, which has mainly been my focus of work, in the most recent AB in 2022, 76% still say democracy is preferred to any other form of government. It suffered a 6-point decline. But at least it is at a point where you can say it's still good enough. But these are some of the things that are contributing to why citizens across the continent are beginning to feel the way they're feeling about democracy and the way they're feeling about military intervention in politics.
Let's bring in Ernesto Yeboah, and my colleague Sweetie Abachi will be coming in shortly. But Ernesto, you have been ferocious in fighting for the interests of the youth and the marginalized in Ghana. I remember you're going to Parliament on that, campaign, and then you got apprehended and all of that. But when you look at this latest dynamic from the Afrobarometer survey, what does it reveal to you as a young person in Ghana?
Well, thank you very much, Ben, and good morning to your wonderful viewers. A bit of a correction there. I'm not the fighter general of the Economic Writers League. You can simply refer to me as leader of the Economic Writers League or commander-in-chief of the Economic Writers League.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm not surprised by the findings of EBD, and let me commend EBD for this fantastic work, because more often than not, when we speak about some of these things, the question has always been about what data are you speaking to, and then we are made to look like we are some mad people who are just looking for trouble where there isn't. And so when organizations like CBD are able to put out, the raw data as they found, what happens is that it dispels the propaganda that has often been pushed against us to silence us as some rabble-rousers who are just looking for chaos. Now, it's important to understand that we did not just enter into democracy or fight for democracy for its own sake. We had expectations. And key among those expectations was our economic freedom, beyond our freedom to speak, our freedom to walk about and do whatever we want to do and things like that. Of course, within the presence of the law. The most fundamental, if you ask everybody, is the fact that we opted for democracy because we felt that it was going to give us a better life. Over 30 years, NPP and DC, 32 years, 16 years, for the global. And people are questioning what the results have been. There are those who, the other day somebody was saying, hey, NSA and Zonka, like, we don't hear from you. Of course, if you are hungry and you are weak, is the most sensible thing being out there screaming when you can preserve some energy in order to see tomorrow. That's where we are. Many citizens have ought to opt out of how they collect their vehicles. Every morning they pass by their vehicles and go and opt for how to call the public transport. There are those who can, contain, 3 meals a day. And we are saying that what? So people have fundamental questions. Yes, we all need to sacrifice, but when you are suffering, when you are sacrificing, and you see, by example, in your hotels, and you see Cecilia Dapas passing billions in her home, and nothing comes out of that, and corruption scandal after corruption stealing, and nothing happens, to these people. We are human beings. You begin to look out for other options that may substitute. And from an academic point of view, I don't think it is bad to contemplate military rule. And I think that
Pause right there for me, Ernesto. What did you just say? From an academic point of view, you don't think it's bad to contemplate military rule? Is that what you just said?
Precisely.
Please explain yourself.
Well, you see, military rule is also another way of engaging the politics of a country. And so it's not necessarily, but if you look at what has happened, with the Sahel regions, Niger, Burkina, and Co. I don't know if the news feed that I am getting is fake or propaganda, but I'm increasingly reading positive things that I wish could happen to my country too. You see, I'm reading positive things. The idea that they are going to opt out of ECOWAS and then come up with their own currency, it's positive. For instance, in the sub-region, if they all begin to use one currency, and ECOWAS, how many years has ECOWAS been on this about ECO and all of that? you can see them taking very important steps. I mean, people who stole money in the past being asked to return the money and being paid, I mean, to do so. So if military rule can offer that, if military rule can say that, hey, DCADAPA, bring back our money, and I'm sure, I mean, 100% of Ghanaians will be excited to hear that. And that's why it's sad when you hear the likes of, what's the name, special prosecutor, I mean, and it's not just him, one special prosecutor after the other, complaining that, hey, I'm not getting the needed assistance, I mean, to be able to do my job. It tells you that, no, I mean, if this is what democracy offers, then military rule might be better. I mean, I can't imagine under Rawlings stealing our money and we are saying
Right.
And no, it won't happen.
Ernesto, thanks for those initial thoughts. Sweetie, it appears Ernesto then feeds into the sample. You realize that the decline from 2011-2013 has been 18 percentage points, 86% in that period, and now 68%. I guess if they had asked him, he would have said that that would be an option for him. What I'm worried about, we all know the excesses of such military regimes. One thing, though, that I've noticed, when you go to the Nigers and the rest, this new crop of military interventionists seem to be different from those from the 70s and 80s. But I'll share my thoughts on that later. It is not to condone military escapades in any way, but you realize that they are on a different trajectory, like in Burkina Faso.
I want to stay on Ernesto a bit because of that comment that it's not bad to contemplate military rule. And I want to, for context, I want to bring back some of the remarks that the former UN senior advisor, Professor Bafo Ajimanjia, made on the back of that One Ghana movement public lecture that, you know, he says that democracy in itself is not bad. It is the political corruption that plagues the practice of our democracy. And if you look at some of the things that this report highlights, it's talking about the decline in both socioeconomic and political performance, with political factors like rising corruption, poor quality elections, and the lack of presidential accountability. So the question then is it a question of reviewing the practice of democracy or the aspects of democracy that feed into these issues which result in the decline, or the decline in democracy? Or is it a question of reviewing the entire practice of democracy as a whole?
Well, I think that I would turn it upside down and say that military rule is not bad either. It is the excesses that we are all concerned, about. And I'm happy that Ben talks about the variants of military rule that we are seeing in the Sahel region and all of that. It tells you that with a proper conversation or ideational view about how to approach that type of government, we may actually find that better and suited in our developmental framework. I remember the likes of examples, in our history, proposing the idea of union governments, UNIGOV, which was, rejected because at the time it was seen as a way by which the military wanted to perpetuate themselves. Of course, we had hope in democracy. It was not that the idea was bad. It was simply the fact that we wanted democracy and didn't want an extension of military rule. But maybe it's time to revisit that idea. Look, you have a country with close to about 70% of your population youth, and yet they have absolutely no representation in the governance of their country. Absolutely no power. And the people we work with, when we go to them and we engage them, not that they stop us make statements that you know what, just give us guns and let us solve this equation. It appears as simple to them as that, and that's where we are. So we need to look. How many times have we screamed about the need to change our constitution? But when you say new constitution, it's like you have set the unthinkable. It shouldn't happen. CUC, in the last constitutional review, exercise, for instance, indicated that, look, extend ex gratia to all workers or scrap it completely. Years down the line, what has happened? So the political class is not interested. They are not. And this is why the contemplation of military rule, cannot be taken off the table. At this point, every option, we must be open-minded as possible to embrace every option and interrogate it and see what is best for our country. If military rule is what is best for our country, let's opt for it. You see, in the idea of the new constitution, we have talked about proportional representation so that women can have adequate representation in parliament. Physically challenged can have adequate representation in parliament. Young people can have adequate representation in parliament. This is a democratic process. But they are not interested. Why should more people get through? They simply want to keep it at the elite field so that all the time they are the ones that can take all the decisions and take all the goodies, for their families and friends. So if it is not working, let's not beat ourselves.
Right.
Let's invite academics into the space. Let's invite thinkers into the space, and let's have that national conversation. As in, what kind of government may be? And you see, this democracy thing also has a history of imposition. So it's not as democratic as democracy didn't come to us democratically. It was as a result of, an imposition. And if you read the CIA report, as in how the 1992 Constitution came about, it all started with, the rebellion that occurred in Burkina Faso with Mathieu Kreko. And then the CIA told, our president then, Jerry Rawlings, he wasn't president then, but the military leader then chairman of PS, that, hey, if you don't take care, it's going to spill over to Ghana. And so, hurry up and put together something you can call democracy, and then let's get down with it. And that's how, in fact, if you follow some of the early
Mr. Eboa, I get your point, and sorry to interject.
Or comments of Rawlings. Let me end on this.
Right.
Early comments of Rawlings, you would find that he more than once said that, democracy is not the way for us to go.
The report is saying it's the youth that are leaning towards this. And before we come to other guests, leaning towards this military intervention, do you think that those who lived, and if you take Ghana, for example, we've had our fair share of military rule. Do you think that those who lived under that regime would appreciate this report and say that we should rather be encouraging our politicians or our leaders to do right by us and not encourage the youth to be leaning in this way? Because they've lived under that regime. I haven't. I don't know, Ben, if you lived under a military.
I have. And
would you appreciate that?
Ernesto, before you come in, I would just say this. I found it interesting. 1K Boateng shares a message. He says, clearly, this is the year 2000 born cowbell generation. They have no idea what we went through in the revolution. Some of us did, actually. We are not that young.
So if you
it is a stark reality. We'd never want to get there. But you see, the problem is, some of these Gen Zs, they have no idea, but they also see military regimes in other West African countries, and they're like, well, these are people are not doing what we heard of in the past. We are sowing the seeds of disaster because our leadership has failed. Pure and simple.
How does that sit with you? And then we go to Dr. Saipapo.
Now, in the last election, let me ask, how many people lost their lives? How many people died? And yet in these Sahel, military takeovers, not a single reported death. Not one person died. And so we have to change our mindset about military rule and perhaps, embrace it in the most broadest terms as we can. I don't fault my mother or father if they are not enthused about military rule. But, if what we are seeing in Burkina is anything to go by. Look, Thomas Sankara, One of the best leaders that Africa.
So Ernesto, please wrap on that point so we can bring in Dr. Osai-Kwapong.
Gaddafi, one of the best leaders that Africa has seen, was a military leader. So we cannot have a blanket still and say that military rule is bad and therefore not desirable. Those who are open-minded enough will see the good that military rule offers.
Thank you for those thoughts there. Dr. John Osai-Kwapong, do you agree with some of the things that Ernesto is saying? And then we'll come to our guest in the studio briefly.
And Doc, before
yes.
you respond, let's also not limit it to, let it not become a conversation of, should we opt for military rule? That's not the conversation. This Afrobarometer survey reflects a lot of what is going wrong in different countries, including Ghana. What are some of those crucial areas we should be looking at as a country that has opted for democracy? So right. I think you should put it in that perspective.
Sure. So, one of the things or one of the questions that I always raise in response to this tinkering with an alternative besides democracy is that we've also seen, it's not as though we've not seen military governments in places like Ghana and our sister countries in the West African sub-region or the continent as a whole. We've seen their behaviors in office. We've also seen how they've performed, economically and all of those things. And so that appetite that is expressed for an alternative sometimes is the question that I raise, right? Is that we've seen some of the things that they are also able to do or not do. So I'm still one of those not convinced that it is an option worth looking at. But you can also understand that when citizens start feeling certain ways about the system of government in place, the consequence becomes, should we think of something else, right? So you are seeing declining trust in institutions that are designed to make democracy work. If you focus on Ghana, we are seeing serious deterioration in our trust in institutions. If you look across the continent and in the report, you're seeing increasing perceptions of corruption. If you also see how citizens feel about government's delivery of key social and economic goods, management of the economy, improving the living standards of the poor, etc., you can see why those sentiments being expressed, where citizens don't feel like democracy is really delivering, then the first question that comes into their mind is, there are some basic things that we want. Good health care, good education, we want good roads, precisely. And when they don't see those things, then the first thing that comes into their mind is they equate it with the system of government in place. And if that system is not delivering, then those questions begin to arise, which is why I made reference to that piece all the way back from 2009, where the author said a day is going to come where citizens are going to look at their balance sheet. In the democracy project that I had, that's the concept that we've been using now, which is, what does the balance sheet look like? And when citizens start looking at their balance sheet and they start feeling like there are more liabilities than assets, where their lived experience, to borrow an Afrobarometer term, of democracy is concerned, that is when they begin to worry and say, well, maybe this democracy thing is not working after all, because we are not seeing, we are not feeling the effects of it. And those effects are more than just we have freedoms. They also want to feel the effects in terms of the everyday bread and butter issues.
Okay, thank you for those thoughts. Let me come to Mr. Kwekupin, still in the studio. You've been following the conversations. What do you make of this report that indicates a growing support among the youth for military interventions in Africa?
Not just among the youth generally, but you would see a lot of young people definitely in there.
Yeah, young people.
I find it very exciting, very interesting, and I'm saddened in part because I was part of the generation that fought against military rule in Ghana.
Oh.
Indeed, I can go into history, but the point of the matter is that, you know, somebody ever likened or made a picture of, I don't know how to call it, but it's like a bird in a cage and a bird outside the cage. While the bird in the cage wishes to come out of it, the bird outside the cage also wishes to go into the cage. And that's the kind of thing. So the bird outside the cage doesn't really appreciate the fact that the one that is in the cage is also seeking its freedom. Now, let me tell you, in reaction, specific reaction to this young man, okay? First and foremost, we had a revolution in Ghana. And all those who fell out, it would have been usual in those days that we had the East and the West, for them to have gone into the Eastern European parts of the world where they practice all this socialism and whatever. But not one of them who fell out went there. They all went to the West. I'm talking about seasoned revolutionaries and the Chris Atims and all of them. You can have their names in the history books. They all went to the West. Why? If they really believed in socialism and all those theories of those days, why would they not go to places like Cuba? Why didn't they go to Yugoslavia? Why did they go to Czechoslovakia and or Russia? They all went to the West. Because the truth, the basic point is, you can have your freedom even when you claim all kind of things. I would rather have my freedom to move about and do whatever I like and go on demonstration in a democracy than to go to systems where all these things are stifled. Now we are talking about
and yet you will be economically stifled. You'll live, you know, a very, should I say, depreciated life.
That is so.
You will not live in dignity. You prefer that?
Well, that's the issue. That's the issue that I'm raising. That I would rather enjoy my freedom, sleep about wherever I want, move about wherever I want, than to go. I mean, let me tell you, these 3 West African countries that they just mentioned, whatever, look at them. Now they can bring whatever they have to their country, but then people, look, you will begin to see when people begin to clamor for their role and participation in the government, you begin to see where things will fall out. So that is the equation that we are looking at. That is not to say that what is going on in Ghana or other countries, but the struggle for democracy or for freedom has been one that did not start today. Even in America, even as we look at it now, there's a lot of disenchantment with the American political system. There's a lot of problems with the average American, that how they find their political system and so forth and so on. But that is life. The whole of life is trying to make it better. And I do not say that we have the best conditions in Ghana, but I'm telling you that I have lived under a revolution. You know, it's very interesting the way I hear this young man speaking as if I have lived under
the young man you're referring to is Ernesto Yeboah.
That is so.
Right.
It's very exciting. And if there are other people like him, let them hear me now. That I've lived under a revolution. I know what it is to live under a revolution where you cannot have your voice, where the military rulers pretend or claim they are making a heaven for you on earth, and yet you don't have a voice, and so forth and so on. I was ever declared wanted in this country for my political role as a student. And I indeed and in fact, so what is going on now? People may be disenchanted with the economics and the politics and everything of this country, but we all can always make things work out through the political struggles that are going on. And we shouldn't make a distance of it. Now, for instance, let me give you an idea. Now, if you go to Europe now, you see that the leadership is relatively very young, relatively very, very young. People in their 30s and 40s and wherever. It's very amazing that American Party Democrats, which allows people like Trump and Biden in their old ages. Now in Ghana, we have with due respect, a very funny situation where, look at our president's age. The youth do not really have a role, a proper role in politics. I admit that.
I think that's what they were saying, that we are not included in the decision-making process of the things that are
that is true, but they have to they have to fight for a place through the political system.
I disagree slightly. I disagree
You may
partly.
have to.
The youth have to fight, but in a proper democracy. And when you're done, I'll read a comment that someone has sent. I think it will situate the next conversation, how I want to approach this.
Yes.
In a proper democracy,
Yes.
you don't say, oh, there are not enough women who want to participate in politics. You create avenues and make it possible for them to want to participate and participate, like Ethiopia has done in their parliament. You do same for the youth, especially for a continent that has 50+% of its population being youth, with projections in 2050 being that you would have much higher than that. Our leaders are simply not thinking. That is the reality. If you live in a part of the world, which part of the world has the sort of boisterous, lifeblood of teeming youth we have? So if you are not providing for them and saying that you are in the minority, just as in apartheid South Africa, this is like age apartheid we're practicing in Africa. The elderly get into power, they abuse power, misuse it for their own interests, and the people who vote them into power, largely the youth, are neglected. Makes no sense. Makes no sense.
How do we work it out? That is the issue. I was a youth some time back. I'm no longer a youth. I fought the system. I did what I could within the political system of the day. Here I am now. The real point is that it's a kind of engagement, because the point that you are making reflects a situation that we've had. Sometimes, and with due respect, when we talk of African politics, the issue then arises as to whether we are using the 50 years maximum of independence to compare, for instance, to America, where their democracy has been how many years? Things have to be worked out. And of course, let me tell you what, I was ever Saba Hall president, okay, in the University of Ghana. Saba was a mixed hall. That was the only mixed hall at all my times. And yet every election was, left to the male only. And this was a mixed hall. And in my own time, we did our best to try and work out a non-competitive position for a vice president for a lady. But we voted out at the JCR, that's the Junior Common Room. Yeah. But that reflected an appreciation of a situation or a problem, and our effort or attempt to work a situation out by having a non-elective position, because we realize that the women will normally, because of the dynamics of politics, the women will not normally put themselves up for elections and so forth and so on. So the kind of situation that my good friend talks about, I appreciate it, but it takes all of us to work the system out. Are we going to have another, Democrats started, and we call it a consultative whatever, before we had a constituent assembly and so forth and so on. Obviously, we're not going to go back to all those days, but once we have the problem, we have to work our situation out.
It's a percentage game. They could say that 20% of members of parliament should be between the ages of 20 to so. That way you are acting intentionally.
That is so.
That is so. For young people.
That is so.
You can allocate a percentage to women. And so then you are fixing the problem.
I'm not opposed to that.
Let me just divert the conversation a little bit. I don't think that the only options we have is democracy and military intervention. What about theocratic, governance, or where we have the royal families doing, taking decisions? And it doesn't come to just two options. And I'm asking myself, just listening to all the things that we are saying here, is it because we do not understand or we don't know that that's also an option? I'm not saying democracy is not working.
We are talking about systems that work.
And that doesn't work?
It doesn't appear. Even in the countries, with due respect, if you really go to UK, the royal family, they are just royal in the sense of
we've seen here that some of the chiefs and kings wield a lot of power.
They do.
We can cite the Kumasi,
right, but
for example, he wields a lot of
but our constitution permits a role for the chiefs.
Right.
Our constitution permits a role for the chiefs, but it's limited. You're very right, but it's very limited. Okay. And obviously, it's open to all of us. I cannot pretend as I sit here that I have all the solutions to Ghana's problems, but a constitution reflects the lifeblood, the ideas and everything of the people. And there's no limit to what we can work out in any particular situation. So that's the way I'm looking at the problems that we have now, that the agitation of the youth reflects a certain anxiety about the way we are running our politics. And it is a call on all of us to reflect on what we have done, where we have reached. We talked about constitutional review how many years ago, they've still not come into being. Maybe it's an invitation to all of us to relook at the way we have done things up to now and find structural changes to the system that we have. That is so.
There are 2 points, gentlemen, all three of you. I think this will be something I'll focus on and leave this subject. Like I've said, it shouldn't become, oh, should we opt for military rule and all of that? That is not the conversation. But has our democracy performed? So I want to read this comment, and then I'll read something interesting that I've not heard anyone discuss yet from the Afrobarometer report. The comment comes through from Godwin Ajetinau. He says, our problem is the misconception of what democracy is. Democracy is not the plebiscite way of electing our public officials. Neither is it freedom of speech. Democracy is accountable governance. Entrusting the affairs of our country and its resources to a party for the same people to self-regulate. How do we expect them to hold themselves to account? And of course, when you have immoral leaders, this is what happens. Look, let us stop practicing this thing we call democracy. We are more educated than this. Those are his comments. Our system of governance is not democratic. A system of governance that allows the managers of the country to self-regulate cannot be said to be democratic. I don't agree with him on everything, but I agree with him on some points. Like you were mentioning earlier, Lord Acton's aphorism, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that is exactly where we are. We give too many wide powers to our politicians, our so-called leaders, I call them misleaders, and they abuse the power. But here's the stark reading. Have we noticed that in this latest Afrobarometer survey, in terms of rejection of military rule, if you go to, let me check the page 13, if you look at the countries in West Africa that have gone the way of military rule, interestingly, the rejection of military rule has gone down.
Because they've experienced it.
It appears the military is performing in a way in some of these countries. So you look, Mali, it has moved from a 58% rejection from 2011-2013 to 18% rejection in this current survey. 40% difference. Burkina Faso has moved from 62 to 25, 37% difference. If you go to Guinea, it has moved from 70% to 57, 13% decline. Let me see whether I can find Niger on this list. It just means that there are problems in these countries, these developments. There's something fundamentally wrong. And if these percentages are showing what they are showing, then it means that even countries over about 2 years who have experienced military rule are beginning to develop some acceptance. That is a worry, and our leaders worried about that. Dr. Osai Kwapong, what is your take? So my question then is, has democracy done Ghana enough good in this Fourth Republic? That's my question to you, gentlemen. Dr. Osai Kwapong, I'll start with you.
Good question. I think we are yet to see the full benefits of a democratic system of government, right? I have often argued, and when I wrote my book last year on 30 years of democracy in Ghana,
right,
one of the things that I argued is that, look, I believe that in spite of all of its challenges, Ghanaians have made their peace with democracy. However, there are also some strong signals that we cannot ignore if we are to consolidate and keep this democracy going for however many years that we want to keep it going. And you realize that for me, it is on two fronts. One is the quality of our public institutions, how sometimes they treat citizens, how sometimes they handle issues of public concern, how sometimes they deliver or not deliver the basic services that citizens need. And when those things happen, the first point of reference the average person is likely to go to is the system of government in place. Especially because democracy, if you think back to all of the conversations during the transition to democracy in 1990, in the early 90s, democracy was tied to development. So it wasn't as though democracy was sold on its own as, hey, countries, go democratic. No, it was sold as, if you go democratic, you would see improvements in good governance and socioeconomic development. So when you're not seeing those outcomes, you can just expect that people are going to say, well, where's the good governance? Where's the socioeconomic development that democracy promised us? And for a place like Ghana, it is that significant movement in the socioeconomic development needle that we are not seeing, that sometimes gets people in the country as well as our sister countries to begin to ask some of these questions about, well, what are we then getting from this democracy? But yes, I mean, we have the political stability, we have the basic freedoms, but I think I believe that there's still a lot more that our democracy can or should deliver.
Right. Ernesto Yeboah.
A few things that the doctor said.
Ernesto, please speak up for me. Please speak up.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Please speak up. Go ahead.
Okay. And so you have a constitution that is anti-youth. I mean, in the whole constitutional document, just show me the number of times that the word youth is mentioned in there. None. Meanwhile, you have close to about 70% of your population being youth. And that underscores the kind of condescension that, I am faced with on this platform, especially from Dr. Osai Kwakwo, when he refers to my youth than to my name. You understand? So how then do you expect that things would work? You talk about democracy, and yet you don't want it. There's no accountability. So the idea that only democracy works, and therefore that is all that should be pursued, is such an unacademic perspective, for anybody to have, especially given the fact that the whole basis is to be able to realize our material conditions and be able to live lives of dignity, to be able to afford, the basics of life and not sleep or wake up in anxiety over where the next meal is going to come from. And so if there is a type of government or a form of government or a system of government or idea that would help bring about this kind of ideational view, you don't take it, off the table and say that focus on what is not, what is not working. It's not working, and we can't be forced to keep our focus on things that if you are fetching water into a container and it is not getting full. It's a commonsensical thing not to do, to ask yourself, why is it not getting full? And perhaps close that chapter.
Right.
How much were we looking for from the IMF? Just about 3 billion. And we all know that the unspeakable truth that we all know in this country is that between Akufo-Addo and Mahama and Bawumia, the 3 of them alone can produce this amount of money. So what kind of system is this that makes the leaders richer than the country? Yeah. So this is where we are. And so if we can interrogate these things in truth and in sincerity, as we're enjoined in our national anthem, national pledge, and all of that, then we need to question ourselves as to what we really want.
Okay. Interesting thoughts. So I guess I'll throw that to you as well, Kwaku Painso, and then Sweetie, we can. I guess these will be your final comments on these.
I'll put it this way: if you read Julius Caesar, when when he was murdered, Antonio started as, it's not as if Caesar was not loved before. There was a time Caesar was loved. Now, you see, the fascination with what is going on in these three Sahelian countries, I'm talking about Burkina Faso, whatever. Anybody who was in Ghana in 1979 will know that students were the ones who carried the revolution into being, went on national, wherever, for over 1 year. There was a lot of enthusiasm that welcomed Rawlings. I was a sixth former in those days. And the university students, they went on national, whatever they call it, they got a name for it, that I was not in the university, but they took off a whole year to go and do national work, all kind of things. But that enthusiasm, you know, I've seen it before. It wanes over time. When issues of freedom, when issues of liberties, when issues, you will notice that life is not about economics alone, which is, of course, is the present focus of these military regimes. It is good. But very soon, people want to participate in it. People want to have a say. People want to move around when they want to move around. And that's the kind of thing that, with due respect, I think some people, the present youth, with due respect, I say it boldly, they don't seem to appreciate. Because it's not just about economics. And let me tell you what, constitutionalism and all the things that we are talking about, they are not a manufactured product on the market. The people have to work it out. The people, issues have to come up. We have to define forums, and we have to define ways, and we have to define means of resolving these problems on our own. And democracy has never been the same in any country. There are all kinds of fun. Maybe Ghanaians, they have been, I mean, Achampon brought all those kind of things. He brought Unigov and those kind of things. People rejected it. If it's about time we need to go to Unigov, it's our collective experience that will shape the development, political development of this country. So I'm not thinking that this 1992 constitution is all that we may require. After all, in the UK, they don't even have a constitution. If you see the US constitution, Ghana's constitution is so fat. I mean, you go to 1960 constitution, about how many pages? 69 constitution grew up, 79, then 92. Every time we do a constitution, it grows up, and it's not the number of pages of constitution that will guarantee the things that we are looking for. So we need to work things out of our own. When the Bible says, work out your own salvation. As a people, we need to work things out. And all these problems that
How do we do that? How do we work things out?
Of course.
But you have a very selfish leadership that will serve its own purposes, like is it Godwin made mention of? How do you work it out?
No, we have the selfish government will attract to themselves all kinds of reactions. But like I was saying, even the constitution has got the means for us to work things out. As you say, we have a constitutional review committee's report, which is still on the shelves. And for people like you and I to begin to question, begin to find out ways that we can bring these things on board. I mean, nobody really cares. I mean, people who think there has been another revolution in this country, they don't know what it is. They have not lived on the one before. They don't know what it is to sleep curfews. They don't know what they are talking about. But if they want to experience it in their lifetime, maybe they should wait when God calls me. Then it will come into being. They don't have a full appreciation. But that is not underscore the fact that we have massive problems with the governance of this country. And that we all need to work it out. And it's not some magical formula that somebody can bring into being. But by, meeting on all of these issues, and I'm not too sure the Ghanaians, we don't have the resources and the ability to work out our problems. Okay. But that is how every country has worked out its own. America that we see today, if you go back into history, go to France, there was a revolution. And you know what the revolution was about? The popular story was that the queen of the day, when she saw a massive demonstration, whatever, people were crying for bread. And you know what she said? That why can't you give them, if there's no bread in the city, give them cake. Okay. That reflected the I don't know, but please, I don't want to hijack your show.
Work out your own salvation. That's my takeaway from your submission. Yes. But interesting conversation. And I still maintain that our only options are not between democracy and autocracy or military intervention. Like you said, we can figure out a new system that works for us based on who we are as a people, what we want. And if government was listening to us, really, democracy wouldn't come under such scrutiny and, people opting out of it. But that's what we have for this Belts of Conversation. Kweku Pencil is a lawyer, and he's staying for the next Belts of Conversation, so you want to stay with us. But, of course, those who join us for
We've not given a bite to Dr. Osai Kwapong and Ernesto Yeboah.
Okay.
So just your parting comments, like I said. So started with him. Dr. Osai Kwapong, in about a minute, final words. We'll do the same for Ernesto and we are gone.
Yeah, there are concerns. There are real governance challenges. There are real development challenges that we face. For me, this report is a real wake-up call for leaders, right? That if they want citizens to keep having faith in democracy, then it must be seen to be delivering. We can't just tout democracy for the sake of democracy, right? Democracy is good for more than just democracy itself.
All right. Ernesto, final words, quickly, very quickly.
Point out that we have never had a revolution in Ghana. What Dr. Osai-Kwapong is referring to is a senseless killing that occurred. The abuse of women, rape, and dissipation of the wealth of the people of this country. That is not revolution. When we talk about revolution, it is about the change in the handling of power by one class or the other. That is not what we saw in Ghana. If you look at China, where they experienced the revolution, there was that kind of change in land reforms and all of that. They closed themselves to the rest of the world, and when they opened up, they became the production center of the world. That is what a revolution is, and Ghana hasn't experienced yet. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. You just heard Ernesto Yeboah. He says he is Commander-in-Chief, Economic Fighters League. Ernesto, thank you for joining the conversation. We also had Dr. John Osai-Kwapong. He is much closer to the Afrobarometer team, CDD, in Ghana. He shared his thoughts as well. Thank you, Doc. And in the studio, and we are actually going to segue into the next conversation with him, Kweku Painto. He is a lawyer. But when we return from the break, we're going to be looking at the LGBTQIA plus bill and whether it is ever going to see the light of day. On the back of the Supreme Court, our apex court, deferring its ruling on the injunction application to hear the substantive matters. What can we expect? Well, we'll bring you details of that after the break.